Australia gaya nyaya pun Iorabajari. We've gold and soil and wealth for toil. Our home is girt by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. Guego, yego, going by Puba, Yerabana, Australia, gal. In joyful strains, then let us sing. Advance, Australia fair.
Thank you very much. Please be seated. That's very different. Thank you, Isaiah. Welcome everybody this morning. My name is Ray Martin. I'm honoured to be with you on this very special day. To begin, a very warm welcome to all those who 20 years ago still feel the impact of that fateful night, all these years later. Those who lost loved ones, those who survived, those who helped in response, and all those who can remember. This service is for you today. Again, welcome Your Excellencies, welcome Senator Wong. I also welcome our former Prime Minister John Howard, who was an important and compassionate part of Australia's response 2 decades ago. Welcome to members of Parliament who are with us today, the heads of government departments, past and present, who were deeply involved in Australia's response in 2002, and to Reece Kershaw, the Commissioner of the AFP, which also played a very critical role. Most importantly, I welcome Dr. Siswo Pramono, the Ambassador of Indonesia. A very warm welcome, sir, to you. Other members of the Diplomatic Corps, we are privileged to have you here today as we remember the losses that your countries also suffered on that sad day in October 2002. There has been a small change to the programs that you have. Auntie Caroline can't be with us, so it's with great respect that I now invite Ngunnawal Elder Auntie Jude Barlow and Mary Mudford to welcome us to country. We have at the centre just here of our gathering a memorial wreath. I invite Auntie Jude and Mary to be the first to place flowers on the wreath this morning. Please, ladies.
Good morning, everyone. Yulma, Auntie Jude Barlow and I acknowledge the President of the Senate, Susan Lyons, Foreign Minister Penny Wong, and Their Excellencies, the Governor-General and Mrs Hurley, the Honourable John Howard, our esteemed family and guests who were part of the Bali bombing, and our other esteemed guests and other First Nations people here today. A welcome is performed for the spiritual and physical protection of people entering the lands of the Ngunnawal people. It is a practice that has been performed for tens of thousands of years by First Nations peoples across Australia to welcome people onto their countries for the spiritual and physical protection whilst they are walking on our lands, to create and maintain harmony and ensuring bad spirits do not harm the country or the people who are walking on our lands. I now invite Auntie Jude Barlow to perform the Welcome to Country in language.
Yulma, which is hello in Ngunnawal, and is the Ngunnawal people's gift to you all. So please use it when you're on Ngunnawal country to say hello, hi, or g'day. And it is an extraordinary privilege to be here today to welcome you all to the land of mine and Mary's ancestors on this sad but deeply moving occasion where we remember the loss of so many. On this day in 2002, 202 lives were lost, including 88 Australians. And people were just going about their lives when the unthinkable happened, when their lives and the lives of their families were irrevocably changed forever. And so today we remember those who lost their lives on that night, and not just Australians, but ordinary citizens from at least 22 countries, including the Balinese people. And many more were injured, and it was the largest loss of Australian life due to a terrorist attack. But one thing I know about Australians is that we are a resilient people. We face flood, fire, and a global pandemic with the spirit of our ancestors. Over the last couple of years, I've had 3 words roaming around in my head: resilience, courage, and unprecedented. And on this day in 2002, we faced an unprecedented event, yet the resilience and the courage of our fellow Australians and others was never more demonstrated than at that time. There were miracles performed to help those who were hurt. Other people put their own lives at risk to rescue others. Ordinary folk with extraordinary courage doing remarkable things to help their fellow human beings. And so today, I pay my respects to the family who have lost loved ones, those who have been injured, and to the good folk who rescued, who doctored, and who comforted others. I honour their memories and the memories of all who lost their lives, and I will remember them here on Ngunnawal country. I would now like to welcome you to the land of my ancestors, in the language of my ancestors, a language once thought dead, but we know it was only sleeping, and we have awoken it. Yangu nalamanyan, donimanyan, Ngunnawal wari, Darul wari, marabiji mulangari jinila, Kolumbani yarbinyan, naragana wali ninyan, Nuna yarbi yangu, Yuma lundi, Ngunnawal wari, Darul wari. And this means today we're all gathering together on Ngunnawal country, and this is my ancestors' spiritual homeland. And we, all of us here today, are keeping the pathways of our ancestors alive by walking together as one. Welcome to Ngunnawal country.
Thank you, ladies, for your generous words. It was shortly after 11 o'clock on that Saturday night, 20 years ago today, that the world changed for so many people with us this morning, and indeed for Australia. As Prime Minister Albanese said in this place just the other day, for most of us, what happened that night is beyond imagining. And he quoted his predecessor, Julia Gillard, on the 10th anniversary, who said, Bali is now a place like London and Gallipoli, where something of the Australian spirit dwells upon another shore, a beloved shore. I mentioned briefly the memorial wreath, an emblem, if you like, over the course of this service and during the morning tea this morning. Everyone is invited to place a flower on the wreath, once decorated with frangipani and wattle flowers, symbolising the unbreakable ties between Indonesia and Australia. The wreath will be placed by the Australian Federal Police at the memorial across the road in the Parliamentary House Gardens, or Parliament House Gardens. You are welcome to join that ceremonial procession at the end of the memorial, following the service. The memorial carries the names of the 88 Australians who died in Bali. I would now like to invite Mr and Mrs Hurley to formally commence proceedings by placing flowers on the wreath. I then invite His Excellency to the stage to read a poem, please.
May time soften your pain. In times of darkness, love sees. In times of silence, love hears. In times of doubt, love hopes. In times of sorrow, love heals. And in all times, love remembers. May time soften your pain until all that remains is the warmth of the memories and the love. Semoga waktu merangingkan kepedihanmu. Dikala gelap, cinta melihat. Dikala hening, cinta mendengar. Dikala ragu, cinta berharap. Dikala duka, cinta menyembuhkan. Dan di sepanjang waktu, cinta mengenang. Semoga waktu meringankan kepedihanmu, hingga yang tertinggal hanya kehangatan kenangan dan cinta. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Your Excellency. Of course, members of the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade played a major role in taking care of Australians, as they so often do, in the weeks, the days, and certainly the weeks after that terrible night. Many of the consular staff who were in Bali helping victims and survivors are here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for what you did. Indeed, our host for today's service is the Foreign Minister, Senator Penny Wong. I invite the Minister to also place a flower on the wreath as we remember, please.
Good morning. I begin by thanking Auntie Jude and Mary and acknowledging the traditional custodians of this land, the Ngunnawal people, and I acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and contribution to our nation and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I also acknowledge the presence of the Governor-General, His Excellency General the Honourable David Hurley, ACDSC and Her Excellency Mrs Linda Hurley, His Excellency Dr Siswa Pramono, Indonesian Ambassador to Australia. Bapak Duta Besar, atas nama pemerintah dan masyarakat Australia, izinkan saya untuk menyampaikan sambutan yang hangat kepada Bapak dan juga untuk mengukuhkan ketangguhan, ketabahan dan kerjasama antara kedua masyarakat kita. Bapak Ambassador, on behalf of the Australian Government, I warmly welcome you and acknowledge the strength, the courage and the cooperation of our two peoples. I also acknowledge the former Prime Minister, John Howard AC, Senate President Sue Lines and my ministerial and parliamentary colleagues, ambassadors and representatives of the diplomatic community, distinguished guests. But most importantly, I extend a special welcome on behalf of the Australian Government to the survivors, the first responders, and the families of the victims who join us today, and also acknowledge the many Australians and Indonesians gathered at ceremonies around Australia and Bali. Well, 20 years have passed since that terrible night. 20 years since 202 lives were so callously taken, among them 88 Australians, 38 Indonesians and citizens of 20 other countries. 20 years since 209 more people were injured, many seriously. 20 years of grief, 20 years of struggle to rebuild bodies and lives. So today we remember what was taken, Today we remember what was lost. And we wonder what might have been had they all come home. What hopes might have been realised. What dreams might have been dreamt. The conversations, the celebrations, even the arguments. In that moment of cold savagery 20 years ago, the usual contours of life's ups and downs were flattened, the bounty of life's adventure lost. And even after all this time, pain remains. But ultimately, the terrorists failed, because while an act of terror might shake us, it cannot change us. Those who attacked us wanted to divide Australia and Indonesia, to shatter the bonds between two great democracies, painstakingly built on multi-faith, multicultural foundations, and to strike at what makes us all human. But the worst of humanity brought out the very best. Out of that dark act were born such radiant acts of courage and of love. The story of that night is also one of great courage and resilience, a story that many of you here today know so well. Survivors became saviours, somehow overcoming their pain. First responders, among them medical staff, police, embassy and consular officials and local volunteers, ran towards the devastation, rescuing everyone they could, going back time and time again to help the injured and comfort the dying. In the face of exhaustion and horror, hospital staff in Bali worked relentlessly around the clock to save lives and treat catastrophic injuries. There were outstanding contributions that night and afterwards from across the Australian government. People like Australia's Consul General, Ross Tyso, and Vice Consul David Chaplin, both with us today, were among the first on the scene. They comforted the victims, including those who could not be saved, desperately arranging phone calls so loved ones could speak with them in their final moments. Civilian and military aircraft mobilised to transport the victims, regardless of nationality, to Perth, to Darwin and other specialist burns units. Australian medical staff, including Dr Fiona Wood and Dr Len Nataris, undertook life-saving surgery and medical treatment on the many dozens of seriously injured victims, keeping them alive when hope seemed lost and nursing them through their pain. And against terror's cruel offering, that was the greatest response. Care, compassion, community, and a bond between two peoples that could not be broken. The Bali bombers tried to drive Australia and Indonesia apart, but the story of our two nations over these past 20 years tells us something different. Our story is one of defiance in the face of terror, of resolve to work together and face future challenges side by side, of unity, of friendship, and of cooperation. Our people and our communities share a special connection that goes beyond governments and goes beyond politics, then, now, and into the future. But today we share our grief as Australians. We shoulder our sorrow alongside the people of the 21 other nations who lost their own that night. And we hold in our hearts those we lost. We hold in our hearts the survivors and all the first responders. We hold in our hearts all who have carried the burden of loss and the unshakable weight of memory, and all the survivors we have lost in the 2 decades since. We remember you, we honour you, and we stand with you.
Thank you, Minister Wong, for those words. Thank you for hosting today's very special service as well. All right, folks, time to reflect for a moment. Let's bring back our award-winning Australian singer, Isaiah Firebrace, with a short musical tribute. Isaiah.
Oh, the lights are turned down low, and I'm sitting here alone, thinking how to get so far from home. Oh, I guess nobody knows, and so the saying goes, you win some, you lose some, still trying to control. Since I've been away from you, I've been searching for a light I could not find, and living for a love out of my mind. I've been hanging on a prayer, then I wake and see you there. Oh, Spirit, I haven't seen you in a little while. I got lost and you got set aside. I heard you've been calling, been busy falling. Spirit, I've been meaning to apologize. I've been running and I'm getting tired. I've been so foolish, got no place left to hide. I lay my head down on your shoulder. I hear you singing, it's not over. Oh, you came to me all dressed in gold. You're the one I've always known. In your love I found my home. Oh, when I wake I feel you there. You take away all of my cares. Spirit, I haven't seen you in a little while. I got lost and you got set aside. I heard you've been calling, been busy falling. Spirit, I've been meaning to apologize. I've been running and I'm getting tired. I've been so foolish, got no place left to hide. I lay my head down on your shoulder. I hear you singing, it's not over. You come to me in the night and dance around me like a satellite. You sing to me and I feel so high. You called to me and I cried. I was running and you hit me like a blinded light. All I need is you by my side. Breathing, feeling, healing, spirit, breathing, I feel it, my spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. Thank you for your spirit. In a moment, I'd like to invite to the stage our dear friend Dr. Siswo Pramono, who's the Indonesian ambassador. The evil attacks in Kuta that Saturday night also took the lives of 38 innocent Indonesian people. We acknowledge, as the Minister said, the close friendship between our two countries, perhaps even made closer by the terrible tragedy and its aftermath. Ambassador, we invite you to also remember with us, please.
His Excellency General the Honourable David Hurley, Governor General of the Commonwealth of Australia, dan Ibu David Hurley. The Honourable Senator Penny Wong, Minister of Foreign Affairs. The Honourable John Howard, former Prime Minister of Australia. The Honourable Member of the Parliament, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land of the Ngunnawal country on which the commemoration event took place today and pay my respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging. 20 years ago today, a hideous crime struck, and it was one of the saddest days in Indonesian history. 20 years ago, a group of terrorists tried to enforce their belief onto others by way of violence, which resulted in 202 people were killed and 209 people were injured. Among the victims, 88 Australians and 38 Indonesia perished that day. Family and friends were left with overwhelming grief, and even though a lot of hearts were broken and our loved ones were taken from us, there are something that the terrorists couldn't take: our love and compassion to others, and the idea of people are equal in rights and freedoms. Those are things that we hold on to, the things that separate us from the terrorists. In the days that followed the attacks, Indonesian law enforcement officers, assisted by the Australian police, put out relentless effort to bring the perpetrators to justice. Indonesia and Australia are nations of resilience and vigilance. Rising out of their terrorist attack, we have built a better and stronger bond among us. Indonesia and Australia developed the Jakarta Center for Law Enforcement Cooperation in Semarang. This reflects the determination of both governments to build a better law enforcement institution and system in Indonesia and other countries as well. This initiative wins active support from partner governments and international law enforcement agencies. Nowadays, the relations between Indonesia and Australia have improved from strength to strength. And the latest development, the two countries have managed to further strengthen the bilateral ties in terms of politics, in terms of economics, defense, cultures, and people-to-peoples. The visit of Prime Minister Albanese to Indonesia and the delegation last June has further strengthened these strategic partnerships. Indonesia and Australia are not just neighbors, but most importantly, we are also partners. In socio-cultural relations, students studying in both countries, tourism and other areas give rise to multi-track relation, the strengthening of people-to-people ties. And just as partnership works, Indonesia and Australia provided support for each other during difficult times. Indonesia sent firefighters to help with bushfire in Australia, and likewise, during this global COVID-19 pandemics, the outbreak of lumpy skin and foot and mouth diseases, Australia helped Indonesia a lot. Lastly, I would like to reiterate the unwavering commitment of Indonesia to combat terrorism. The people of Indonesia stand strong against terrorism that threaten our democracy and our national security, our national integrity. Indonesia's unity and diversity, Bhinneka Tunggal Ika, is the foundation of our culture, the culture of tolerance, peace, and mutual respect, the culture that is also strongly held and practiced by the people of Australia. With the rich history of relations between Indonesia and Australia, I am certain that we can prevail over any challenge that might come, especially terrorism. Today, as we commemorate the 20th year of Bali bombing in Australia and in Indonesia, we vow for a strengthened partnership between the two great nations so that the heinous crime will not be repeated again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly, Ambassador. Thank you for joining us this morning. Australia's Prime Minister at the time was, of course, John Howard. Mr. Howard visited Bali days after as the tragedy unfolded. It was clear that his presence was a source of great comfort and support for the families of victims, for survivors and for the hundreds of Australians who were working tirelessly on recovery and who were caring for people. Mr. Howard, it's good to see you today. Would you please join us?
Your Excellency, Mrs. Linda Hurley, Senator Penny Wong, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, other ministers, the President of the Senate, Senator Birmingham, the Leader of the Opposition in the Senate, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honoured to say a few words at this very important gathering. And my first remarks, indeed, my constant thoughts today are with those of you present who lost loved ones on that terrible occasion, whether it was a husband, a wife, a girlfriend, a boyfriend, a son, a daughter, or just that most treasured of Australian species, a mate. It was a terrible experience. An act of terrorism, I said at the time, was too antiseptic a term to describe what had happened. What had happened was brutal, villainous murder. And out of this terrible tragedy, which has continued to cause heartache and grief, there developed a resolve very early on between our two nations to find those responsible and to make their prosecution, their conviction and prosecution, an example to not only the people of Australia and Indonesia, but to the people of the region and the world, of our determination to resist this kind of evil behaviour. And we saw during the days and weeks that followed wonderful cooperation between the police forces of the two countries. I remarked earlier this morning to somebody that I think Mick Kelty, who was then the Commissioner of the Australian Federal Police, had been in touch with some opposite numbers of his in the Indonesian police before any contact at a government level had occurred. Such was the seamless determination to cooperate. This is an occasion to honour those who lost so much. I hope today's gathering is some comfort to those here today and in the broader Australian community who continue to mourn the unjustified, brutal destruction of the lives of people who meant so much to them. Through this, some of the great Australian characteristics shone. I always thought the Australian personality is a bit of a duality. We can be as tough as tungsten, as resilient when the occasion arises. But gee, we can also be warm and compassionate. And I've never forgotten, after the attack, I visited the RAF base at Richmond in New South Wales. And I spoke to a young recruit. She'd only been in the Air Force for a few weeks, and she described how on a flight to Darwin, she and a group captain had comforted a young man who they thought was going to die during the journey, and fortunately he didn't. And that, of course, reminds me of the tremendous work of the Royal Darwin Hospital. Under the guidance of Dr. Len Nataris, it didn't matter where the person came from, whether the person was an Australian, an Indonesian, a Brit or whatever. Everybody was looked after. And of course, the magnificent work of the burns unit of the Royal Perth Hospital under the leadership of Fiona Wood. It was just extraordinary. Rightly, she was a native of Yorkshire to become an Australian of the Year. I could think of wonderful further stories, but it is an occasion to honour Ross Tyso, the Consul General, who was on the streets of Bali immediately afterwards. And I was able, within a few hours, to speak to him on the phone, and Rick Smith, who was our ambassador in Jakarta. I think the most lasting monument to the folly as well as the evil of those who murdered our 88 fellow Australians is the fact that their goal included driving a wedge between Australia and Indonesia, and that failed. Australia and Indonesia worked together. They prosecuted together, they convicted together, and they have become closer, not further apart, as a result of this particular incident. So it's a reminder of a number of things. It's a reminder that evil is always there, and there's no permanent barrier to evil, but we can prepare ourselves and better deter it in the future. And that's what we've done over the last 20 years. The intelligence arrangements that have been sustained by both sides of politics in Australia have endured and strengthened, and we will never know what evil attacks those intelligence arrangements have effectively deterred, and we should always keep that in mind. The other thing we should remember is that the spirit of the young will never be dented. Bali was regarded at the time of the attack as almost part of Australia, although politically it wasn't. Sentimentally it was. The Balinese people are much loved by Australians, particularly by the young of this country who've been there. And of course, what the terrorists failed to achieve was to dent that spirit. The young of Australia have continued to seek adventure. The young of Australia have continued to go to Bali. Now, can I say to all of those who demonstrated in the aftermath of this terrible attack, the police, the military, the superb cooperation between the different elements of our response effort, can I say that they did Australians proud. They demonstrated the best of the Australian spirit. And can I finally say to those here today and in the broader Australian community who lost so much, you haven't slipped from our thoughts. We understand that the pain continues, but remember that there are a lot of your fellow Australians who feel with you, and although we cannot have the pain and the anguish that you have, I hope the fact that we care for you and understand what you have endured is of some comfort and some support. Thank you.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Howard. We thank you for what you did at the time as well. You mentioned the AFP, one of those extraordinary Australians working tirelessly in Bali at Ground Zero. From the beginning was Detective Inspector Mark Lang, OAM, of the Australian Federal Police. I think the AFP's Operation Alliance, until recently, was almost the untold story of what happened in Bali. Under the guidance of the Indonesian National Police, the AFP spent many months with a team of about 500 people on the ground helping to locate and arrest the terrorists, of course with Indonesians, while also identifying and repatriating every one of the 88 Australians who were killed. Above and beyond, Mark Lang and others in Foreign Affairs as well have stayed in touch with many of the victims' families, most notably forming a lifelong bond with Simon Quayle, a football coach from Perth who lost 7 of his players that sad night. Simon and his family have joined us, the Quayle family, today. We welcome you. Thank you for coming from Perth. And would you please join us now, Mark Lang. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Ray. I'm extremely honoured to represent first responders, and in fact all responders, that contributed to the aftermath of the terrorism incidents that occurred on the 12th of October 2002. I chose today not to wear my uniform because although I responded as a police officer, today I'll represent and respect the thousands of responders to these incidents in Bali. The responders that provided assistance to people in Bali, Australia, in fact around the world, they are just too vast in their numbers to list, but you know who you are. My role included being part of the initial AFP response from Canberra and involved in deploying from Bali and working with the Indonesian police team that was tasked with tracking and capturing the terrorists involved in the incident. We deployed throughout Java, Sumatra, Sulawesi, and Kalimantan, and captured many of the terrorists who were subsequently brought to justice. Upon arrival in Bali, we were confronted with scenes of absolute devastation, loss of human life, survivors with horrific injuries, emotion-charged family members and friends of the missing, massive property damage, a multitude of other issues that I now go with a mass casualty event caused by mass explosions. Quite frankly, it was overwhelming, and I simply didn't know how we were going to manage what we were confronted with. So we did what responders do. We got to work. I was quickly reminded of something that I was taught as a junior police officer, which was, if we're not here to assist and protect victims, what are we doing here? We respond because people need our help, not to get ourselves on the front page. Without victims, there is no response. So we got to work, and the rest is history, and has been documented many times by many people over the last 20 years. I tell a quick story about the impact that responders can have on victims. Very early in the response, in company with colleagues, I found myself taking a statement from an 18-year-old young man at his hotel in Kuta. He had left Perth with his football teammates on the 12th of October on their end-of-season trip. He was with his teammates at the Sari Club when the bombs were detonated. 7 of his teammates were killed. This was the very first time, and in fact the very first day, that he'd ever left Perth. He was terrified. As I completed his statement, he said to me, "They're going to come back and get me, aren't they?" I said, "Who are you talking about, mate?" And he said, "The terrorists." I said, no, mate, they're not going to come back and get you. I'll make sure of that. And if you are scared, you can come and stay at our hotel down the road. It's full of police. He chose to stay with his mates. It was not until some time later that I was made aware of the profound and positive impact that my words of support had on that young man. I'm still in touch with him today, and he's doing well. I would like to acknowledge everyone that responded to this tragedy, at the time after, and in some sense still today. It was an unprecedented, massive multi-agency response, and any and all success that is attributed to the operation is due to the cooperation between all of the agencies and all of the responders involved. On the subject of responders, I want to acknowledge the Indonesian police that we worked with in the field. As a result of their absolute dedication and sheer tenacity, many terrorists were caught and brought to justice. These police, well, we came to consider them our brothers. I want to acknowledge all the victims, especially the thousands of family members, loved ones and friends who were also profoundly affected by the tragic events that we commemorate today. On behalf of all responders to all victims of all crimes, mass casualty events and many other forms of tragedy, thank you for allowing us to serve. We hope we make a difference. Finally, after 35 years with the Australian Federal Police, I retire from service today. In doing so, I would like to acknowledge, on behalf of all responders, our families, our loved ones, and our support persons. You allow us to serve. You know who you are, and without you, we could not do what we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you for what you and the other responders did. Please enjoy your retirement. I didn't want to single anybody out, but Mark was talking about the Australian responders, and I noticed in our group today, with us today is Richard Joy's CV. Richard was awarded the Cross of Valour, which is the civilian CV for his heroic work in rescuing Australians from the Sari Club. Richard, thank you for what you did, and again, I know that you represent all those responders, but welcome. It's lovely to have you here. All right, ladies and gentlemen, in a moment, Pak Gede will play a beautiful Balinese rhythm for us on the suling, the Balinese flute. But before that musical interlude, I ask that you join us in a moment's silence to pause and reflect and remember. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Pak de Gay. That was delightful and moving. He looks like a puck, doesn't he? Thank you very much indeed for that. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the formal part of our commemorative service today. Our host, Penny Wong, would like to invite you all to enjoy some morning tea down the back of the room. It's also a chance to perhaps reconnect with some of those who share your story, who perhaps understand. I invite our 4 Australian Federal Police officers to please come forward to assist with the wreath. During morning tea, we invite you, as I mentioned, to place a flower on the wreath, to maybe pause and reflect and remember yourself. Thank you, gentlemen. Not that you can ever forget. As I mentioned earlier, the police will shortly lead a ceremonial walk to the Bali bombing memorial in the formal gardens on the eastern side of Parliament House. You are most welcome, everybody, to join the walk to the gardens or at any other time. This, after all, is your Parliament House. Ladies and gentlemen, I know this is a difficult time too for many of you. We thank you for coming today. There are social workers here today at the end of the lines who are wearing bottle brush pins to help identify themselves. If you need any help at all, any questions that you may have, then please feel free to meet them and ask those questions. Okay, now I welcome you to move to the back. We've got to do this with some order. To the back of the room for morning tea. May I ask that you use the centre aisle if you would like to go back and have a cuppa. For those wishing to place a flower on the wreath, please make your way down the side aisles each side and please enjoy yourselves. Right, to lead us into our morning tea break, let's welcome back our troubadour, Isaiah Farbrace, joining the wonderful string quartet here with a little Beatles tribute, we hope, an appropriate sentiment for everybody today. Here Comes the Sun.
The sun, doo doo doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo doo doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Little darling, little darling, the smiles return to their faces. Little darling, it seems like since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo doo doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Sun, 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 here it comes. 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 Slowly melting, little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Oh, here comes the sun, doo doo doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. Here comes the sun, doo doo doo. Here comes the sun, and I say it's alright. it's alright. It's alright.